Hello, my darlings and viewers. Today I am once again joined by the wonderful Eldar expert Proxy Hammer, and we'll be looking into the psychic phase, how the Genestealers and Eldar are coping with psychic phase, and the changes that the Eldar have had, whether they're still quite strong. Hello, Proxy Hammer.
Hey, how's it going? It's good to be on the channel.
It's always nice to have you. So, having seen that there are some nice changes to the Eldar, they're once per phase for the Fate dice now. I've played a couple of games of the Battle Sisters, even small games, and I never found I ran out of Miracle Dice, even when I wasn't losing any units. So that was a good thing. How are the Eldar coping since the change?
Well, I think it was very easy to run out of Fate dice before because you basically had no incentive to keep them within the first couple of turns. You would just get rid of them as fast as possible, which is what I always did. Of course, this kind of interaction wasn't always the best, especially if you're using things like the Wraith Knight. But I'm not running out of Fate dice per se because I can only use once a phase, but I'm spreading them out more over the different phases, which I think in general is it feels a little bit better.
It's more Montcar than Kauyon.
Yeah. You have to think a little bit harder about how you want to use the Fate dice and stuff like that. And, you know, much in the same way as Sisters of Battle, right? Sisters can only use one dice per unit per phase.
We think so.
Eldar can only use one a phase. So it's a little more limited.
We think.
Yeah.
Debates reign on how you actually use Miracle Dice. Whether you could, in theory, pick up 4 Miracle Dice for the damage rolls on all your melter guns. That seems to be okay. It's just depending on how you consider one dice roll. If you're fast rolling, is that compatible with Miracle Dice, or are you just a single die? Because Games Workshop never says die in any of their text.
Yeah, I've noticed that about them. I don't think they ever have, actually. I think they always use the word dice. I'm not sure why, but yeah, I've always noticed that in codexes, when they refer to multiple dice, it's always multiple dice and not die. But who knows? Maybe that's a weird thing, corporate thing. Who knows?
It might be just you can know you can't search the word die and find it. Oh, there's 254 times the word die comes up. It's horrible, this
Right.
game.
Right. That might be it, dude. I think that might exactly be it. They don't want to use that word because obviously it has a different meaning as well.
Yeah, they have been associated with Dungeons and Dragons before, which is, of course, your satanic ritual game.
Right, of course. God forbid GW be associated with death and destruction and satanic rituals. Corn.
More than they already are, for gameplay purposes.
Exactly. They have a reputation to protect for being a family-friendly game. Don't you know that?
Yes. That's why we lost the Dominatrix from the Epic line. Hey, Daddy, can I have a Dominatrix, please? That shop sells Dominatrix.
Absolutely. What about Cruella de Vil? Do you remember that from the Dark Eldar?
Dark Eldar character.
Yep. Cruella the Vil. Really old Dark Eldar character. Obviously a parody of Cruella de Vil from the Disney movie 101 Dalmatians. But, that character is no longer canon, but she existed, man. And her model is very, well, revealing.
Short on attire.
Yeah, very short on tire.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it goes along with the same character. Obi-Wan Clouseau, Inquisitor Obi-Wan Clouseau, who was a canon character in Dark as first edition, Rogue Trader era.
That's great. You could tell all these creators just were big nerds, right? I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Obviously, right? Before they ran into probably copyright issues and stuff like that, but that's funny.
Yeah, but they also had more recently, for any of the lizard men, you've got like Tic-Tac-Toe.
But yeah, in general, I'm finding Fate dice, I'm not finding that I run out of them too fast because of the new rule, but I'm having to use them more spaced out and things like that, which I think is generally good for Eldar. I think they probably needed some change like that. But unfortunately, I don't think that was the right fix
It's all about devastating wounds for you, isn't it?
Yeah, it's still getting those devastating wounds for you, and you can use it. You can technically use it during your opponent's turn too with things like Wraithguard. So, a common thing people do is they take a Spirit Seer, they give them the Fate Reader ability, which is a once per turn ability, so you can use it both during your turn and your opponent's turn.
Mm-hmm.
And you can use a Fate dice of a 6 during your turn and your opponent's turn. And when I say opponent's turn, I don't mean Overwatch, I mean Wraithguard shoot you if you shoot them in your opponent's turn. So you shoot a unit of Wraithguard, they're going to shoot back. And with Fate Reader and a Fate dice, you can get 2d6 more wounds out of it pretty easily.
Yeah, is that Fate's Messenger?
Yeah, that's Fate's Messenger, yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't even need to be a Fate dice. You just once per turn after making a dice roll,
Yeah.
you treat the result as a 6. No Fate dice required.
Right, you roll first. You can roll first. Fate dice, you at least need to actually use it before you roll.
That's a really good one.
Yeah, exactly. Fate Reader is amazing, and it's probably the best on 2 models, either the Death Jester or the Wraithguard, the Spirit Seer.
Yes, I can see that work. Because then it's all one unit.
Yeah, it's all one unit, so you get to roll it. You know, leaders are counted as part of their unit, so you can definitely do that. So that's very powerful, and that's kind of one of those things in the game that's like, okay, well, I limited mortal wounds, but not really, you know?
Yeah.
I limited it on some units, but some units are still getting a lot of them, and it's pretty insane. So, you know, I think a lot of people are complaining about Eldar and how strong they are. You know, they are a very strong faction. They're one of the top factions in the game, if not the top faction. And the reason for it isn't because of, you know, their aspect warriors. Let's be real here. It's because of the devastating wounds mechanic. You know, I think all the aspect warriors are really balanced. I don't find anything wrong with them. They perform their role. They do it well.
I think they're actually points appropriate. Whereas in previous editions, it's been like, oh, these are amazing aspect warriors. So this toughness 2 dude with a 3 up save or 4 up save, yeah, that's going to be 16 points for that one guy. And it's not been quite right.
Yeah, it's never been quite right. You're right on that. You'd pay a premium for that always. And I think GW got it right this edition with aspect warriors as far as their points and their rules. Obviously, I'd like to see stuff like Exarch powers return, you know, for additional points. You have an Exarch power, but we'll probably see that in the Codex.
Yeah, it could be like an enhancement, something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, it could be. It would be cool, too, to see that.
Or they may just stick with the Phoenix Lords.
Yeah, true. Yeah, the issue is squarely on devastating wounds. Yeah, it's insane. I mean, I play games. I played, you know, quite a few now of my Wraith list. And my Wraith list has a Wraith Knight in it, and it has a Wraith Guard and everything. It's just pure Wraiths. So just imagine just an Iandan list, you know, there it is.
Yes, the fluffy kind.
Yeah.
It's also performing well right now.
It's really powerful. It's really strong. There's not a lot, unless your opponent knows how to dismantle it properly, there's not a lot that a player going into Eldar, maybe they've played a couple games against Eldar here and there, they're just not going to be able to deal with it. Because it's so much more to wounds.
Even the characters that are buffing them, like the Spirit Seer, if you throw sniper shots at them, you've got ways to counter that. With things like the Phoenix Gem.
Yeah, and then you have Phoenix Gem to survive one round. I actually think with a lot of armies, the meta right now, it seems in tournaments, is running big units that could be buffed easily. So Chaos Space Marines have their Terminators. You take a squad of 10 of those. I might be mistaken, but basically regenning models every turn, you know? So that's very powerful, this edition. So when you look at something like Wraithguard, who have a Spirits here that can regen and on top of that give the unit buffs, that's going to be a priority target to kill. And if you don't have any precision weapons to deal with that character, you're going to be out of luck. That unit, whatever it is going to do much more work than its points values would suggest. That's just kind of how you wrote the rules, you know?
Chaos Terminators don't even need a character to regenerate. As long as they have a Mark of Tzeentch, they're getting a model back every turn, plus a guy healed to full wounds. Yeah, Mark of Tzeentch. So I just ran it earlier this week as my first game of Chaos. I put them in deep strike, which was probably a waste of their potential. But then when they came out and took some damage, yeah, just one command point, I'll heal him and get back the guy that died.
Anything that can resurrect your models is going to be extremely powerful. So you do need things to be able to deal with those, or you just have to not interact with that enemy unit, which is harder said than done.
Like if they bring one Imperial Knight, I would think either I focus everything on that or I ignore it for the game and hope for the best.
Right, exactly. If you don't have the tools to deal with it, ignore it. If you do have the tools to deal with it, take it out, be done with it. Yeah, either
Yep.
one. But don't mess around with it, you know. Don't shoot a couple things at it and then realize after that you've made a huge mistake because it's too late.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I would say the same thing with the Wraith Knight, but the problem with the Wraith Knight is not only can you see him, but he can see you. And he's doing tons of mortal wound damage. Yeah. I think the Wraith Knight.
I know there was like that it needs changing, but they've only done a quick points update recently, which was fair.
Yeah, I think it was fair. Yeah, it was fair. I think they hit everything that needed to be hit, but the problem is that the problem with the Wraith Knight isn't really the point. Isn't the points. It's the devastating wounds ability, which it has. And if you combine that with things like fate dice and a lot of volume of attacks, I mean, you have to understand also that the Wraith Knight has two of these cannons. Each of them have D3 attacks with blast. So they're getting a bunch of additional attacks against units. And that means that they can convert those natural sixes to wound into mortal wounds.
And then you could use a fate dice on that to get maximum mortal wounds.
Right, exactly. And each one is doing 2d6 mortal wounds. They're very powerful weapons. So
Yeah.
46 mortal wounds on average a turn is pretty
Okay.
insane.
So for 475 points, 46 mortal wounds a turn, yes, you can get rid of those 10 Terminators with their 30 wounds pretty efficiently then.
Yep. In 2 turns, you can get rid of them. And there's nothing your opponent can do about it unless they destroy the Wraith Knight. So, I mean, I know Chaos has lethal hits. They have the Dark
Pact. Yeah.
Pact, yeah. So they can get rituals with lethal hits and things like that. But I mean, even so, unless you're running a bunch of Havocs or you're running a bunch of like heavy artillery kind of stuff, it's going to be hard to kill that Wraith Knight.
Yeah, I was fighting against one Black Templar tank, and I hit it with a couple of las cannons, but I just didn't have enough anti-tank stuff. I had a lot of really good anti-heavy infantry, but the tank became a problem. So you've always got to have anti-tank in this edition, I think. And melter guns are not anti-tank really anymore. Wounding things like that, it's a Predator equivalent. Like the Gladiator, you're wounding it on a 5, it's not doing its job.
Yeah, true. Melta guns are not really great at killing tanks anymore. They're better at killing, light tanks or heavy infantry.
Yeah.
I've actually noticed that with fire dragons. Fire dragons, unless so here's the thing about fire dragons. When they get out of the Falcon, they're pretty decent against tanks because they have rerolls to wound.
Because of the Falcon. Yep.
But yeah, but after that, they really fall off quick. And they're not so great at killing tanks after that. They'll probably die anyway, to be real, right after right after that, because they're so fragile. But if they do survive, if they do get behind cover with Phantasm or something like that and they live, if they want to pop something else, they're kind of more hard pressed to do so. And that's because melta guns are just not as good.
And shorter range. Battle Sisters are feeling shorter range melter guns. 18-inch melter is, yeah, it's appropriate, I think. It's just pointed great.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? It's just like sisters. What has always been their way to deal with tanks? Meltas, right? They want to like burn the heretics, you know what I mean? And like melta guns are like the perfect embodiment of that. And well, they can't really do that much anymore because melta guns aren't as strong against tanks, which is unfortunate. I mean, you have your miracle dice though, which allows you to like boost damage rolls and stuff like that, which is really good. I think, melta weapons with miracle dice is like really strong.
And then you just have to hope the enemy fails an invulnerable save, and then you'd get 1 or 3 damage.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Right. The invulnerable save is there. So
Melter pistols. Like on the characters and the Seraphim, that's damage D3 now rather than D6.
Right. Yeah, I've noticed that on the fusion pistol as well, by the way. The fusion pistol is the same thing for the Eldar.
Apart from the core skill, theirs is D6 still.
Oh, the Eldar one is D6? The
Yeah,
fusion pistol?
Eldar Corsairs. I don't know who they nicked the weapon off, because no one else has D6 damage for their melter pistols, but they do.
Interesting. I didn't even know. I thought fusion pistols were D3. I guess I was looking at the wrong thing.
Yeah,
Weird.
I mentioned it in my index errors version 2, with version 3 should be out already by the time I'm editing this.
Okay, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of errors as well, just like things that don't make sense at all. Like the Autarch's Reaper launcher is stronger than the Dark Reaper launcher from Dark Reapers.
Yep. Chaos Legionaries, if they have an autocannon, it hits on 2s if you stay still, unlike the one in the Havoc Squad, which hits on 3s, regardless of whether you move or stay still.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that's so ridiculous to me. I don't know.
On a captain compared to on the intercessors, they made a whole thing about how, oh yeah, intercessors, they got fire selectors now, so it doesn't matter whether you've gone for the assault version, the sniper version, the regular version, it's all got assault and heavy. Apart from the Space Marine captains, their master crafted version has no fire select button.
Well, that's just painful, isn't it? Being able to fire with the whole unit except the captain.
Yeah.
Yeah, they really need to just go through and just fix all these mistakes. That's why I think it's so good that you're doing this list of mistakes. You know, maybe GW will catch wind of that and finally fix all of them, because there's just so many in the game. You know, models not having melee attacks. You know, Dire Avengers don't even have attacks in close combat.
Nor do the Storm Guardians with Flamers. They lose their combat weapon.
Yeah, and that means rules is written. You know, obviously, you know, like my gaming group has actually said that, you know what, this is obviously some sort of gross error. There's no way this model can't attack at all. That's never been the case. We just basically give them close combat weapons. But hey, rules is written. Like if I was at a tournament, my Dire Avengers would not be able to attack in close combat.
Or there's equal equivalent rules to say they should have a dire sword each, as it is rules to say they have a close combat weapon.
Right, exactly. Right. So there's like some like weird interpretations and stuff there. That's just, to me, that's just nuts. You know,
Yeah.
they really need to go through and fix that, because not being able to fight in combat with a unit just doesn't make any sense.
I think it's okay just putting it on the data card itself, as long as they remember to put it
Yeah.
on the data card.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And they have to change so many of them now. There's been so many mistakes.
Other stuff like the Chaos Chosen, they swap out their pistols for combi weapons rather than swapping out their bolt guns. So I'm seeing it as you fire both, as if it's like a bolt gun combi weapon combined. But then people are like, well, the combi weapon is half bolt gun combi weapon. So I asked my opponent, what do you think I should do today?
Well, if you ask your opponent, you're always going to be getting the worst of the two.
I mean, usually they say, it's fine. Or like do the Genestealer Cult acolytes get their demolition charges back? I say yes when they return either through the banner or through a blip token. Other people are like, oh, they have the weapon, but they can't fire the weapon again because it's the same model, just not in fluff purposes, but in rules purposes.
Right. It's a different model. Well, I mean, in rules purposes, it's a different model, right?
It's debatable. I think we're on like 70-30 for, I did a community poll. And 70% say, yeah, it's a different model, 30% are like, it's the same guy and he's fired his weapon.
Yeah, that's the weird thing, is like, how do you determine that? You know, like, do models come back with their war gear?
Yeah.
You know, that's interesting. I mean, fluff wise, right? It's not that the model is getting up after dying; it's that a new one is replacing him, right?
Did Daddy come back from the demolition charge store just like he promised?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, hey, like, you know, 55th, you know, son, come up here. We need help. You know, and he just comes up there with a new demo charge out of the ground. You know, I feel like that's probably what it is.
I've got my 12th bullet wound today. I'm fine. You know, the start.
Yeah.
Rise.
I mean, hey, they're not Necrons, but I mean, you know, they're bugs. Bugs are pretty durable. Genestealer Cult, man, they're doing great. They're doing great in tournaments. Yeah, they're up there with the Eldar. I mean, really, they're quite strong. You know, I think strong in different ways. Obviously, they're not doing a bunch of mortal wounds every turn, but you know, they are pretty strong. They have a lot of board control. They're really good on objectives and things like that. They're very hard to play against because they can be everywhere at once.
Yeah,
So they're doing pretty good.
And figuring it out how good the Genestealer Cult are is very, very small player base. So if you look at tournaments, it's like, oh, there's 2 or 3 people in like this 50-person tournament that play Genestealer Cult. And if they're coming out in the top 50%, it's like over proportional Genestealer Cult is done because they're still quite a difficult army to play. Not as difficult as before. You're like incredibly fragile, but also you need to be clever with it.
They definitely are, just like Harlequins used to be, you know? Like Harlequin players were like the same, you know? There'd be like a couple Harlequin players in a tournament and they'd have a really high win rate because those players were really good with Harlequins. So that's definitely a thing. You're right.
I did a poll with my community days ago with 260 some results. 60% said they would prefer not to fight against Eldar and choose someone that they completely didn't know what kind of army they had. And then 40% were like, given the choice between Mystery Opponent and Eldar, I would choose the Eldar. So we're still needing help with that. I'll do a video that's like helping people to fight against Eldar.
Yeah, I mean, I think what the main problem is people just don't know how to get past that Wraith Knight, and it's just so oppressive. They're like, okay, how do I deal with something that can see all my units and do an average of 46 mortal wounds a turn and is very tough? Well, you have to, you know, and how do I deal with that in addition to Wraith Guard and everything like that? Well, you have to plan for it. You know, it's not something you could just throw together a list and hope to do well against it. You really do have to plan every step of the way. And for competitive players in tournaments who are wanting to go into tournaments and are thinking, God, I hope I don't face Eldar. If you're thinking that, you probably haven't done enough homework or practice on that faction.
Yeah, I mean, if you got an anti-heavy Eldar Wraith, something that'll defeat Eldar Wraiths, then it's also going to work against defeating all of the Destroyers for Necrons, the Terminators for Space Marines, things like that. The armies that are coming up, Tyranid Warriors will go down to it.
Right, you need tools for those units, you know? Like those toughness 5, high toughness, 3 wound models, you need things that can deal with those targets. If you don't have those, then they're just going to walk all over you. Terminators included. Terminators are very tough. That's another thing, right? Terminators now have 4+ invul base. They have toughness 5. They're very durable. They have a lot of buffs that they can, be buffed by and stuff like that to make them even tougher. So that's something you need tools against. And of course, if you're a casual player and you just like to play casually, facing down an Eldar Wraith Knight is not going to feel good. No. That makes sense. If I was going against someone I knew was new to the game, I would never bring a Wraith Knight because I know that they're not going to be able to deal with it. And they're just not going to have any chance. And that's not good either. But, at the competitive level, competitive players complaining against it, guys, there's things that can be done. Put your minds to work here, think a little bit harder. There's ways to deal with Eldar. A lot of Eldar players will also run Warp Spiders because Warp Spiders are like really good objective in the objective game and stuff like that. And they're also really good at dealing damage. They also deal mortal wounds with torrent weapons. So
Storm Guardians.
Storm Guardians, yeah. Right. Yeah, Storm Guardians are funny. They're not terrible, though. I don't think they're as bad as they were last edition. Sticky Objectives is a good ability. I just don't know if they're really worth it, but, I think they're decent.
Defenders just to hold objectives anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Defenders are good. I actually was thinking of a strategy with them where you have a unit of Storm Guardians and a unit of Defenders, and turn 1, the Storm Guardians are on the objective.
Yep.
And then they move off the objective, and then the defenders take the position. And then even if you destroy all the defenders, that objective is still sticky because of the Storm Guardians. Yeah, so that's something you could do with Storm Guardians, and you can kind of shuffle them around the battlefield and basically just force your opponent to have to put models on objectives and keep models on objectives. instead of just killing. Yeah, they can be given power weapons, although I don't think they're really good in combat, even with the power weapons.
No. No,
I
they're not.
mean, they kind of probably want to avoid, ironically, they probably want to avoid combat at all. Right. And they actually had close combat attacks last edition, and now they don't. So, yeah, Yeah, exactly. On the flamers and fusion guns, it's like, God, why, But yeah.
The Genestealer Cult are doing well. I don't know if there's anything that I would deliberately not take against a new player, other than a
Yeah.
million neophytes, which would be a pain to blow
Yeah.
field again. But that could be still quite fun for a new player.
Yeah, I think Genestealer Cult doesn't have anything that stands out to me as just broken. Like, they don't have any one unit that's just like, okay, this unit is a problem. I think they're just good as an army. I think they're really powerful because of the way the game is and the way, objectives are now.
Yeah.
They're very strong at doing that job, which, it's fine. They're working as intended. Whether or not you want to increase their point values or whatever is a different thing, Like, if you think, I don't know what GW thinks, but maybe, if Genestealer Cult is doing super well, they maybe say, well, maybe Genestealer Cult has too many models on the board for a lot of players to deal with, competitively even. So maybe we increase the point cost of some of these units and call it a day. And maybe that fixes the board presence issue,
Build bonus. If no one's playing Genestealer Cult before, maybe they will now. Or they'll do something like the tokens attack.
Yeah.
If you're within 10 inches or 12 inches, or make it so you come back on a 5+. So there's a chance that like neophytes and acolytes won't come back if you roll that 1, and other units like Genestealers and aberrants will only come back on a 5. That would just easily counter the thing that people think is scary about the Genestealer Cult, which it isn't the scary thing. It's the really good combination between characters and units, which is what this edition's all about.
Yeah, it seems like it. I mean, a lot of characters are just buffing units super efficiently. And that's really strong, Spirits here in Wraithguard, really strong.
One of them that I think isn't doing its job well is the Genestealer Cult Magus. You get like a 5+ Feel No Pain or Invulnerable Save. Let me just double check which one it is. Against psychic attacks, which is kind of like the last edition where it only came up once for me. It is. Oh, it's in that order. Here we are. The Magus gives you a 5+ Feel No Pain against psychic attacks, which is like it was in kind of like last edition, but it only came up when I was fighting against Tzeentch stuff one time. For 50 points, you can get that, or you can have an Icon Ward, who is also 50 points and also gives everything Feel No Pain against everything. Still 5+.
Yeah, that's
so.
That's one of those things, isn't it?
Psychic is a problem. The lack of a psychic phase.
Yeah.
Because we have one psychic power, which is mind control, a 12-inch range. That means that if you roll a 6, the enemy cannot shoot for a phase. One unit if you roll a 6. It's not.
It'd be a really cool thing is if it actually allowed you to control the enemy model and the enemy model shot at its own unit.
I've done that before with a Titan, and my friends told me to never bring it up again, otherwise they'll disown me. But that was an ability.
Funny.
You got to fire all of the guns off, use one close combat weapon. Like, I think I'll fire all of the guns on your Titan, please.
Yes, that's tight. That's funny too. That'd be a cool interaction. I think in general, though, I think the psychic phase is a lot less powerful for a lot of factions. Like for Eldar, the Warlock Bodyguard essentially gives Feel No Pain against psychic attacks.
Right.
And I mean, that's pretty useless. That's just not going to be useful against most factions, because most factions are not going to be, unless you're fighting Grey Knights, most factions are not going to be spamming psychic attacks at you.
That's what I was thinking for, like, we have the Sanctus, who is a sniper that specializes in killing psychic units. Now, there are, like, every now and then you do come across a psychic character or psychic unit. But that's a better counter for the Genestealer Cult to use rather than having a Magus.
Right.
So I'm kind of missing the choice of psychic powers as well. Not I didn't care that much from like a gameplay standpoint. I just want my Magus to not have a 12-inch range offensive thing. It would be nice to have a defensive thing. The Patriarch's power I love. The Explosion of Fear from Cosmic Horror, that's like a mini Shadow in the Warp. So it very much suits him.
Right.
I like that.
Yeah, I think having options for psychic powers would be nice. When the codexes come, like this character can either have this psychic power or this psychic power.
Yeah.
I've noticed with a couple of the combat patrols, they have a similar kind of thing where they can have either one or two enhancements. So you can switch out. You can either have this enhancement or this enhancement.
Yeah, I saw
And if
that.
they did that with psychic powers, that might not be a bad idea.
Or you can have an offensive stick. I like the offensive stick, but
yeah,
the Magus is meant to be a combat character. You can put them with acolytes and get into the enemy, but I think they're much better with neophytes defending something.
Yeah, I mean, Eldar Warlocks, they're kind of the same. They're in the same boat. You pay 45 points for a single Warlock on foot, and all it does for your unit is it minuses 2 from charge rolls, and it gives you an automatic 6 advance if you choose to do so, which both abilities are just okay, but I don't think I'd pay 45 points for it.
And their weapons like the Singing Spear and the Witchblade are not really anything to write home about.
Oh, I mean, I would go so far as to say garbage. They're just really bad. I mean, there's some builds where I think Singing Spears might be good just because of the fact that you have a Falcon. So you could drop out of a Falcon with a unit of Singing Spears and just throw all your spears and use Destructors and stuff like that, because you can use Destructor and a Singing Spear together because it's not a pistol.
Yeah.
But other than that, I just don't really see the point. It's
well, the Witchblade,
they're really expensive
for your fate dice because they have anti-infantry.
Yeah, they could, right? Definitely do that. But then again, it's like, well, I'm gonna wound on a 2+ mostly anyway. They don't have devastating. Yeah, exactly. What am I going to use 2s on, right? Very true. Very true. So, I mean, I guess you could do that. That could be okay. That's not bad. But in general, I don't know. They're just Warlocks. Just seem like a shadow of their former selves. They used to be a really powerful unit in 9th edition. A lot of people didn't like using them because, whenever you expose an Eldar unit to enemy fire, typically it just dies, regardless of if it has extra wounds or whatever. So that's still the case, but I think there's a very big discrepancy from how good they were in 9th edition and now. I think they were much better in 9th edition just because they could take, different psychic powers, they could buff different units, and their combat was just better.
They could actually do some combat. Yeah.
Yeah, they were good at it. I mean, Singing Spears were, they still wounded on 2s and everything like that.
Yes.
And they had damage 3 and strength 9 when thrown. So they were pretty effective. Unfortunately, you just can't do that anymore.
And the AP0 is where they fall down.
Yeah. You know what, though? I actually found that they were really good against things like the Tyranid Warriors, because Tyranid Warriors only had a 4+ save, so they were really effective against things with 4+ or worse that had multiple wounds.
Yeah, I suppose like Squig Hog Boys, a lot of the Orc things rely on having a lot of wound and high toughness, but no save, so that could wound them pretty nicely. It's very
yeah, they were really good against them. Yeah, they were decent. They were a decent toolbox. You could have a unit of them, and they could usually find a target to be effective against in an army. But now it just seems like you just don't take them. They're just expensive, and they just don't do a lot.
And you're going to fast to get more fate dice, better fate dice.
Right. Yeah, exactly. But you could always obviously put a Farseer in a Guardian squad and call it a day.
Yes, don't to bother with the Warlock Conclave or individual.
Yeah, don't bother with
Guardians.
Yeah, exactly. They don't have much use.
I like the Oathway style. So it's basically no aspect warriors, Guardians, and vehicles to support. Of course, those are crewed by Guardians, and then have Farseers and Warlocks throughout. It's fun, but easy to play at the power level that Eldar have now.
Yeah, I mean,
But
you could do that and it could be really fun. I was actually thinking of a list that had 3 Falcons with, 3 Warlock Conclaves. You have Eldrad in one of them, and you have 2 Farseers in the other 2, and you have 3 of them on foot. They go in the Falcon. You can put another character in there as well. You could just, have a character by himself, and you could just unleash a bunch of psychic devastation on enemy units all at once. Is that a very competitive thing to do? No. But it's really fun to do. I mean,
yeah, at least Eldrad gets 2 psychic powers.
yeah, he has Mind War and he has Fortune. Or no, sorry, excuse me. He has Doom. So that's pretty good as well. +1 to wound. And then Farseers have Eldritch Storm. So they're pretty good as well. Yeah, and Eldritch Storm, I mean, rerolling wounds is great,
Oh yeah. That's a lot of attacks, yes. Diviner of Futures. At the start of the battle, while making your first strands of fate dice, you roll an extra 3 dice. So that may
Yeah,
be as good as a Farseer, but in theory it could be.
it
Get
could if
more.
you roll some 6s.
Yes, I mean, you're getting extra
Yeah.
dice. You get 1 6 from that. That's probably worth it for the extra dice. You would just want
Oh, yeah, I
extra
would say so.
support.
Yeah,
Hmm.
I would say that's definitely worth it. I think Eldrad's good. He's a little bit expensive, I think, though. I mean, 100 points, and you're arguably getting a similar thing with regular Farseers. So,
Yeah,
I think if you're running something like that, it's really good. But he's a little bit costly for what he is because you're also paying for a better combat profile, and
you don't
you
really
know,
need
yeah, it's like
that. Is
I don't really want Eldrad in commons. you
I was
know,
thinking when I compared the Sanctus to the Vindicare. Oh, the Vindicare assassin is better in combat. Well, has a better profile. If you go Knife Sanctus, that Knife Sanctus is going to be better at killing any infantry. Seeing all of these psychic models, I'm thinking I need to get my Sanctus painted up and ready for a battle. Like if I'm going to be a Eldar and stuff.
it certainly looks like a cool model.
Oh
It
yeah.
certainly looks cool, and it's a great counter to Spirit Seers and Farseers.
Well,
So
I have because it's Genestealer Cult, and they're pretty much all roughly neophytes with something else like an explosion, demolition charge, and now it's a not a Sanctus, a Reductor, Saboteur, or you just have a sniper rifle and now it's a Sanctus, or you have a couple of pistols and now it's a Kelemorph, you have a banner and suddenly you're an Icon Ward. It's a very
yeah, they all look the
convertible.
same anyway.
Yeah, so I wouldn't bother, for my Genestealer Cult players, I wouldn't bother buying these individual models. Just get a set of neophytes and acolytes, and away you go. There's all your characters.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. I would do that as well. I wouldn't waste the money on a Sanctus. I would just convert one. It's easy.
And I'm sure
It's
they'll
like
bring
for
out
Eldar players, like if they want to run Illic Nightspear and they can't find Illic Nightspear anywhere, well,
resin model,
they're
wasn't he?
you could just yeah,
Minecraft?
he was originally metal, I think, and then he no, actually you're right. I think he is just resin. Now I think about it. I don't think he was ever metal.
No, he came out in like
Yeah.
2012, 14, about then, when they were doing their
Yeah.
Finecast.
The days of Finecast, which were just
Hmm.
well, it was almost as bad as the end times. Let's just say that from Warhammer Fantasy, it was on that level, where it was just so bad. Gosh, Finecast was just so hard to work with.
Yeah, so it's not a great model to find. So yeah, just convert a Ranger. The new Ranger models that came in that boxed set, can't remember the name of it.
Eldritch Omens.
That's it, Eldritch Omens, which also gave you the Shroud Runners. The snipers
Yeah.
in that look really nice, and one of them, which is standing on a tactical bit of Eldar ruin, could very much just be Night Spear.
He could. Yeah, very well could be. And there's actually a head in that box that looks like Illic Nightspear's head where he has the mask on the face.
And the top knot.
Yeah, on the top knot. I think there's an exact head that looks like that. And you could easily just use that head
Oh, look, there's a picture
and
of it
just
on
call it a
screen.
day. Yeah, do you see it?
Yeah, I think they all
That's
see the
cool.
comparison. There's the Ranger, there's Illic Nightspear. There's no difference, really.
There's really none. They look exactly the same. It's great. You could just literally use him as Illic Nightspear, you know? You don't have to spend the extra money on Illic Nightspear, which he's really expensive. I mean, I guess some tournaments might find a problem with that, but who cares? I've always found tournament rulings like that very superfluous, just like there's no
Yeah,
real reason to do that, you know?
and as long as you're
Like,
using a Games Workshop model, Games Workshop isn't going to care.
right, exactly. It's like, this is my special conversion using your model kits.
Yeah,
Like, why would you care about that? Like, don't you want to incentivize people buying and converting things from your kits and doing creative things?
people have been getting the team for Eldar and just making loads of characters. There's a Spirit Seer, a Ranger, a Farseer, a Warlock, a bunch of other dudes. Oh, yeah, a whole set of 5 Rangers because they come with the Shuriken rifles, which are basically looking like sniper rifles. So there you go. You want a box of Rangers and Illic Spear, 4 characters? There's your set. Yeah, like the Battle Sisters, not neophytes, we don't call them neophytes. Novitiates. That gave me a Canoness, a Dogmata, a Hospitaller, a Imagifier, a Repentia Superior, and enough models left over to make 4 Repentia.
Wow, that's awesome. What an awesome box.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. Yeah, actually, it's funny. A while back, when in 5th edition, when I was going to a lot of tournaments and things like that, there was this tournament, and I brought a converted autarch to it.
All right.
And mind you, this is when autarchs were kind of just like not that good. But I was running one because you could give it the dragon fusion gun and you can give it a couple of other things. So I thought it'd be a cool model for like popping a tank here and there
Yeah.
and joining fire dragons and stuff. So I use one, but I convert it. I had a converted version of it. I didn't have the official model, and I brought it. And the first thing that happened was a judge went over to my table and he's like, "Oh, I think we might have a problem here. That's not an official autarch." And I was like, "Well, it has all the same weapons. It's converted." What I
It's
did was I took a Dire Avenger
yeah,
and I converted a Dire Avenger Exarch into an autarch, basically.
with the back banner.
And yeah, exactly. I had a back banner on him and stuff, and he looked pretty much the same as an
Nice.
autarch would look. And he said, "Nope, you can't use it. Sorry." He talked with some other, like one of the tournament organizers, and he came over and he's like, "You're gonna have to play without it." It's like, what?
Right.
That was one of the stupidest things. I was almost. I mean, I almost like was pissed. I almost left, but I ended up just switching it out. They said it was fine if I switched it with something, so I did. It's just like one of those things. Yeah, it's like, come on, like really? I can't use an autarch, even though it's at the time objectively worse than just other stuff.
Yeah, we're not proxying in, oh, I have a Wraith Knight, but it looks like a Wraith Lord.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Right. Or it's not like I'm using the 2nd edition Avatar of Khaine because he's smaller, you know?
Yes,
Like,
yes. 2nd edition Avatar of Khaine was fun in 2nd edition. Well, sort of. It would still go down to like basic heavy weapons fire, but there was only one gun that the Battle Sisters had that could hurt him, and that was a heavy bolter, because he was immune to
yeah,
anything strength 4 or lower, and immune to fire weapons and melter weapons. So it had to be that
that's
one
right.
heavy bolter.
Yep. Had to be heavy bolters. That's funny. That's true too. I remember, oh my gosh. I remember I played the Salamander player once, and I had an Avatar of Khaine in my army, and I felt so bad, because he dropped 3 drop pods worth of meltas near his area, and
Yeah.
he's like, "All right, combat weapons, let's go meltas." And he's smiling like he's just gonna kill this thing. I was like, "I'm just gonna let you know that the Avatar of Khaine is completely immune to melta weapons and flamer weapons." And he looked at me. He's like, "Dude, that's all I have in my army." I was like, "Well, you can shoot him with bolters." And he just looked. He's like, "Man, and then the Eldar hate started flowing. You know, yeah, the
Yeah.
salt was a lot."
Well, if there's a lot of like Eldar hate at the moment around their army rule, if you could make a new Eldar faction rule that would be accepted by all players, what sort of thing would you think of? Because I know at the moment you're doing a community. What kind of wraith unit would you design? I would stick wraiths with wings because I like the idea of wraiths with wings, like Gollum. But you could just quote that to people every time you played.
Yeah,
So
you could if you wanted to get universally hated by everybody. You could.
yeah, well, you're an
You
Eldar
could do
player at
that.
that point, so you've got the hate.
Yeah, I know, right? It comes with the territory. You're already expected. You're already hated when you walk in the store. Yeah, wraiths with wings would be really cool. I think it'd be a really cool unit. I think that's awesome. I think wraiths with warp jump generators would be tight, or swooping hawk wings kind of thing, where they're like, very mobile wraiths. That'd
Maybe
be
we'll
really
stick
cool.
with the warp jump generators. Then the kind of idea of they're floating through the infinity circuit, being tended to by the actual warp spiders, and so they put on warp
Right.
generators to go fight. I don't think the wings would work, just from a
Probably not,
flying kind
but
of
it would
point of
look
view.
cool.
Yeah, tiny wings.
A giant, like 10-foot tall, like 6-foot wide walking machine, with these like swooping hawk wings, like flying through
Oh,
the
you've
air
got
all
to make them
gracefully.
really tiny. Like some VTubers just have wings on like their shoulders or their neck just to represent them.
Right, right. That's so funny. Yeah, just like flying through there. That's great. That's great. Yeah, that's a good idea. I think if, as far as an army rule, I think believe it or not, I think Strands of or Unparalleled Mastery is pretty balanced as far as it goes. I don't think it's like overpowered. I just think in combination with a lot of other stuff, it might be, it might be really strong. Obviously, with the Wraith Knight stuff like that, it's pretty strong. If people are having a problem with that single reroll though, to hit and wound per unit, I think Fleet of Foot would be a good ability too. Fleet of Foot is also a thing that you could possibly do, and maybe it could give a bonus to advance rolls
Like the
and charge
unparalleled
rolls.
foresight could be the army rule and then a detachment to make it faster. There you go.
Right.
There's Fleet of Foot and also jet bikes. Jet bikes move faster.
Yeah, it could very well be that. It could be, and I think they're probably going to add something like this later on to like a Samhain detachment or a Wind Rider detachment kind of thing. But you could have something that gives you bonus to your movement, advance rolls, and charge rolls. So that could be decent. I don't think it would be that powerful, but it'd be good. I wouldn't say no to some advance rolls and stuff like that. And
Because currently the Dark Eldar are outpacing the Eldar, both on foot and with vehicles.
yeah, they're much faster. Which, you know what? That's always kind of been the case, though, and I think that's okay. I think I'm okay with Dark Eldar being faster and more fragile. I think
They are extremely fast and extremely fragile, whereas the Eldar are very fast and very fragile, but not extremely fragile.
Yeah, I mean Dark Eldar. I mean, unless you're running racks, they're really just paper mache. Their vehicles are just like,
You say, "Oh, I'm
yeah,
going to play Dark Eldar," and then it turn up with a homunculus coven with all of the grotesques and things. It's like, "Oh, I did not prepare for this at all."
yep. It's kind of the same thing with wraiths. Whenever you think of Eldar, you don't really think of wraiths first. You think of like aspect warriors, right? You're
Yeah,
like, oh, well, they're elves. They're not very tough, But then you see Wraith Guard on the field, you're like, toughness 7, 2+ save. What is this? Is this even Eldar? It doesn't feel the same. Like there's always that like kind of break where, yeah, most of the army is fragile, but then you have these units that are really tough, which is cool. I actually like that as far as game design.
they have a big range of models to choose from, and that can, in theory, do pretty much anything. If you want to do all snipers, you have an entirely Alightok army with just rangers led by your converted Mr. Nightspear.
Yep. And you could have Vipers taking away units cover and stuff like that. Definitely. Definitely. And that wouldn't be that bad either. Because Rangers are good on objectives.
You could be an Eldar YouTuber and just never run out of content. There's always a different playstyle to consider.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't run out of content. I've not run out yet. I mean, I know there's a new edition, and now there's like tons of things to talk about every day. But that's true. Eldar have so many different ways to play.
And that's just on like Genestealer Cult and Battle Sisters. I haven't
Yeah.
needed to branch out much more than that.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, there's channels dedicated to one army, and they do just fine. I mean, you don't really. The thing is with the thing that's great about Warhammer 40K is it's such an expansive game, and each faction is so detailed in its own way, and the way that the game works and stuff. You could be talking about different strategies and tactics for a long time,
And then you can talk
and
about
for
the
years
lore
and years, I thought I was just, going crazy with how many, weird thing is, I've been playing this game for 20 years, and for the better part of 20 years, Warhammer 40K is like always on my mind. I don't know what it is, but it's always in my head. I keep thinking about it, and I can't stop thinking about it, man.
I have had times when I didn't think about it as much. Usually when I was like moved away and couldn't find many players, but eventually found the players, and then we're talking about it every day, and we have dedicated, what was around at the time, Facebook groups, and then Discord groups just to talk about them.
Yeah, it's much easier to connect with other players nowadays. I mean, when I was a kid, it was like you kind of had to go down to the shop and see who was there, and play whoever was there. But now there's groups, which, by the way, I like more, because the group I'm currently playing with, it's people who enjoy the game a lot, who are competitive. So it's a challenge I mean, some of them are better than others, but it's a challenge in general to play against them. And you don't get, you get some complaints, obviously, but you don't get that level of toxic, gaming that you would get if you just picked up a random game against a random dude, So there's a little bit of a better thing there, I think. If you belong to a gaming group as well, it's kind of like the social atmosphere of a group like that keeps players generally not toxic, because they want to continue playing games with that group. When I was in high school, I used to go to this games workshop, and there was this guy who really no one wanted to play against, and I remember we were doing this league. He was actually coincidentally another Eldar player.
Okay.
We were doing this summer league, and no one wanted to play this guy. And basically it was like a first come, first serve kind of thing. You just played whoever was there, and like you counted your points at the end of the summer. And no one wanted to play this dude. Like, he could not get games against
And it's
anybody.
not just because he played Eldar.
Yes, it's not just because he played Eldar. It's because he was a jerk. I remember everyone thought he was a jerk and didn't want to play him. So one of these days, I made it a point I was going to play this guy. I had a pretty competitive army, in 5th edition. I was a seasoned player by that point. I knew, I won most of my games against, the more casual player, and against the more competitive player, I was pretty much positive win rate. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to play a game against him. I walk into the store. I say, hey, let's play a game. He's like, he looks at the first thing he does is he looks at my army. He's like, oh, you play Eldar. And he looks at what I have.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, should I play my Eldar or should I play something else? And I was like, okay, great. He's going to play something. Watch him play something else that counters me. But he decided to play his Eldar.
I've got the perfect counter just in this other mystery box.
Yeah, this mystery box over in the corner that I never bring out,
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, he ended up playing Eldar, and I ended up beating him. And throughout the whole game, he was just calling me on everything. I mean, calling me on my movement. I think I told you in a previous video that in 5th edition, you could give your Wave Serpent a free pivot either before it moved or after it moved.
Yeah.
And this didn't count as your movement because you had to pivot the vehicle, because back then there were vehicle facings. So if you couldn't pivot your vehicle, that was going to be really bad. So I pivoted my vehicle. Yeah, exactly. It's on a circle base. So, I pivot my vehicle, and he says, you can't pivot your vehicle. And I was like, why not? He's like, because it counts as extra movement. And I was like, yeah, go ahead and show me that in the rule book, my friend. And he's leafing through the rule book for probably 20 minutes. And I already know this rule doesn't exist. And like his friends are like sitting there being like, dude, like, I think he's right.
Just play
There's
the
like
game.
no way you could do that. And they're even trying to give the dude examples. Like, and I was just having fun watching him just look through the rule book. And they were like, think about it, man. Like, you can't pivot. Like, how would that even work? How would you even measure that? And it's funny, they're his friends and they're on my side somehow. And he's like, I know there's a formula or something that you have to use. Somebody said it online somewhere. And I'm like, come on, dude. Like a formula, man. I was like,
formula online. Good. That is a great reference.
Yeah, it was completely ridiculous. And I was like, look, it's in the rule book. It's a rule. Like, unless you can show me that what you're saying is true, like we have to play it this way.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, okay, fine. And just like everything I did was just like, there was something counter to it. I remember I was using a night spinner which had indirect fire.
Yep.
And back then in 5th edition, there was a chance that the mission would begin in the night. It was like called Dawn of War or something like that. And basically every unit got stealth and every unit got like some other bonus. Like you couldn't shoot it within a certain distance. So I fire my night spinner at one of his units and he says, you can't do that. It's night. And I was like, well, actually the indirect fire rule ignores nighttime. And he's like, no, it doesn't. It doesn't. And I was like, it does. Let's check the rule book. And he's reading the rule book. And I was like, it's going to be the second paragraph.
Yep.
First
of
line.
night fighting. Yep.
Yeah, of night fighting. And he was just like, okay, I guess you're right. I've never used a night spinner before. I didn't know that. I was like, what the hell? Like, come on.
You kind of have to trust
and
your opponent.
The thing is, I knew he knew that rule. I knew it because his other army used a whirlwind. And he was the kind of player that would know those kind of rules. Like, he was doing this on purpose to try to get away with it. So it was just like that all game. It was like that all game. And I remember at the end of the game, he basically never left his deployment zone. He just stayed on his home objective in his deployment zone. I captured the middle objective. I captured my own objective. And that was the game, He did kill a good amount of stuff, because the mission was just that way in 5th edition where, if you didn't have a lot of line of sight blocking terrain, you were going to lose a lot of stuff. So it was a good game. We shook hands afterward. And then at the end of the game, he's like, I think you should replace your fire dragons with Wraithguard. And I was like, okay. Why do you think I should do that? I can't fit that many Wraithguard and they're really expensive. Well, like, what's your reasoning? They do less damage. They're more expensive. What's your reasoning behind this? He's like, well, I just think they're stronger. They're a little bit more durable.
They don't need to be. That's not their job.
Okay, they're in a Wave Serpent all game. Who cares?
That's pretty durable.
It was just bad advice. And I was just like, okay, like, right on, dude.
Like, who won the game? Who won the game? Huh?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't a bragging moment. It was just kind of one of those, like, really? Like,
yeah. With the pivoting,
you gave me shit all game, and now you're going to give me advice on how to run my army better?
With the pivoting, some people didn't quite understand the pivoting. They thought you could, like, move your Wave Serpent, get units out, and then, like, just pivot around so it's facing backwards, get the people out, and then pivot again. But that's where
you can't pivot twice. Yeah, that was legit.
Like
if I had done that legit, I understand.
And then you move another unit, including getting a different unit out. Yeah, that was where it's
right.
That's where the only difference was. Before someone in the
comments
only pivot one. Get in the comments, say that the pivoting is done wrong. Get in the comments.
Yeah, you can only pivot once, but you can pivot a full however much you want once you move. So it's like you move, you drop your unit out, or you pivot first and then you drop your unit out. That's how it went. And that would leave your Wave Serpent vulnerable to attack because it would leave the rear open. Yeah, so there was a legit disadvantage to it. But I just remember it was just like so funny to me. Like, you're telling me I can't pivot at all? I don't understand this. And he was it's like trying to tell me there was some sort of formula for it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, what is there some sort of like?
I'm guessing most of the people you've played with along the years have been a lot of fun.
Yeah, they have. I just, every once in a while, I'll get some weird game where I have, just a really salty player or a really like rules mongering player. I have so many funny stories about this, but.
And then that person is like, I'm going to remember you.
Yeah, I'm gonna remember you and tell the story about you later.
And if they beat you, it's like I'll get revenge. You'll see. I'll become a YouTuber and tell everyone.
How much of a jerk you were. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what's ironic though? I've never really I've went against really like kind of players who won, but it was never to the point where I felt like they were a story of revenge. Like I'm gonna go, I'm gonna tell this story to people so the people. No, I've never been that kind of guy. But it's just like I just find some situations so hilarious. And it's
Hmm.
usually the people that can't win a game. I have to admit, the saltiest players are players that don't put enough thought into the game to actually consistently win. And that's okay if you just want to play casually. But then again, like, you don't have the right to really complain that much then. You know what I mean? It's like hopping into a game of chess and having only played a couple times in your life and losing at chess and complaining that the game is broken. It's like, no, you just don't know how to play it. Like, you know what I mean? I mean, that's okay. It's not a big deal.
That's something. Chess is symmetrical, 40k is not. Yeah, I mean, there are people who are like, oh, I barely play this game. I've got an army. I don't know if it's good. We'll have some fun games. And yeah, they lose, but they have the right mindset of, I
Right.
expected that would happen. But the first rule of the game is we do this for fun.
Yep. That should be the only thing you really
Hmm.
do it for is to have fun. And anything you do to have fun, like my version of fun is creating new types of different lists with new different types of strategies and units and things like that. I run a lot of different things. And oftentimes I proxy things in games. My group is, they're cool with it. They proxy stuff too to try new stuff and, just to have fun. And
Yeah,
it's more like that, you know, and that's a better environment. And I found that that's generally a better environment. But I'm surprised when players go in with the mindset of, I'm going to be the best. I'm going to like practice to win in tournaments.
like no one else ever was.
That's the wrong mentality, man. Like you get into the game because it's fun, and the tournaments and stuff are just an extension of that.
Yeah, they're a pretty minor part, but it is kind of annoyingly where Games Workshop gets their data from on what's too
Right.
powerful and things. So it's only the
Yeah.
most extreme version of an army, and then suddenly you see army-wide debuffs that just
Yep.
hurt the casual players because they weren't
Yep.
running 3 Wave Serpents and 2 Wraith Knights.
Right. Exactly. I mean, did you see the recent tournament list that was winning? I think after the nerfs, I think it was double Wraith Knight, and I was just like, okay. I think every competitive Eldar list right now has a Wraith Knight in it.
Yeah, I saw one that was 2 or 3 Fire Prisms, Farseer, 1 unit of Guardians, and then a bunch of Wraiths.
Yeah, it's like, okay, it's the same thing every single list. So it's like, okay, what's the common denominator here?
Mm-hmm.
Well, devastating wounds. What do you know? And then everything that doesn't benefit from devastating wounds is like stuff that doesn't need fate dice to operate.
They weren't bringing any support weapons, though. They have devastating wounds, and there was no support weapons in these tournament lists.
Yep. And there's a reason because support weapons have 24-inch range, the D cannons. So
Ah,
they only have
right.
movement 3.
Shadow Weaver has devastating wounds as well, and that's 48-inch range.
It does, but it sucks. I mean, other than that, I mean, it's 105 points. You're averaging maybe one mortal wound with that thing, and you're really only taking it for its support barrage ability or its, artillery barrage ability.
Yeah, artillery barrage. Select a unit. That unit is suppressed and is at -1 to hit. Okay.
Yeah. So that's really all you're taking it for. It's a good utility model, but
It's not dishing out the hurt.
yeah, it's not as good as the D cannon. But even the D cannon, it's like, well, it is indirect fire, but you're paying 105 points.
Because all the support weapons went up in price, not just the D cannon, because there's no individual weapon points. I would like to see that come back. I mean, I'm okay with like a flamer, melter gun, plasma gun all being the same. I see how they do different roles, but are roughly, arguably equal. But then you've
Yep.
got your bolt pistols, your free demolition charges, perhaps infinite demolition charges compared to a mining weapon. I want to have a Lehman Russ without the sponsons. That would be nice. And not have to pay for sponsons that I'm not using.
Using them all at the same value is just not going to be good. I mean, every army is going to take the most expensive options possible now because it's the same cost.
Bombast field gun is the same as heavy las cannon, so you got bombast field guns, use them. Use the missile launchers that are pointed at the sky as the bombast field guns because they look like they're the indirect fire ones, unlike the actual field guns.
Like you would just never use the heavy las cannons from Pro Guard. You're always going to use the indirect fire version because they're just better, you know?
Yeah.
Like last edition, you didn't really use them because they were really expensive, you know? They were like the most expensive option. And I was like, oh, well, like, do these compare good to mortars? Nah. So I'll just take
Not
mortars. I actually think, you know, the matchup guard versus Eldar, I mean, and unless, of course, you're running a bunch of Wraith Knights and a bunch of cheese and stuff like that, you know, if you're running a regular, you know, Eldar army, mortars are very scary.
Warp spiders just popping up behind.
Yeah, warp spiders, swooping hawks. Swooping hawks are really good against them because they could just get it right in there from reserve from the back table edge and just wipe them out.
The Hawks, las
Blast
rifles,
blasters.
las blasters. Totally different to las guns.
Yeah, right. I mean, like it's funny because I know Eldar way back in the day did have lasguns and like
Yeah, in a second edition, and then they said, actually, Imperial Scholars got it wrong. They're all shuriken weapons, no matter how much they look like lasguns.
right, exactly. It's like, oh, yeah, it was a mistake. We
Yep.
just didn't know much about the perilous Xeno, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Yeah, and they were the only ones that really kept those types of weapons were swooping hawks because nothing else really has anything like a lasgun. And it was closer to a lasgun back then too. I think the last blaster used to be like basically a lasgun but with more shots. It for the longest time, swooping hawks were just awful. I remember just they were one of the worst units in the codex, and there was only one way to run them in third edition was with an Exarch with the sustained assault ability, and basically he could just keep rolling attacks over and over and over again until he failed every single attack, and it was infinite. So yeah, it was literally infinite.
Because assault cannons were horrible in like second edition for that.
You just keep rolling and rolling until you rolled what was it, a double one or something like that?
Well, I think any kind of double was a jam.
That's funny. They had some wacky rules back then that were just like so fun to use, but
Yeah, but there also were times when Terminators would wipe out an entire enemy army just by themselves.
yeah, where he just would not roll doubles, like, you know.
I mean, nowadays, if you're fighting against Imperial Guard, you're going to want Wraiths, you're going to want Fire Dragons. What about using Fuegan?
Oh, Fuegan's great. He's great.
Does he want to be in a unit, or could he, in theory, run about by himself, even without Lone Operative?
He could run by himself because he has the revive ability. So it kind of gives him, and he's kind of on the cheaper side at 115. So he could definitely run by himself. I mean, there's a case to have him jump out of a Falcon and then just die and then do the same thing the next turn. He can definitely make up his points worth. There's also a case to have him with Fire Dragons because if you have him with Fire Dragons are now more effective against heavier vehicles with Fuegan. So you could kill a Land Raider.
I like the idea of Dragon Fusion guns hitting on twos and then getting a reroll to their wound. Now we're taking out vehicles in one shot.
Yep, exactly, right? And Fuegan can take 12 wounds out of a Land Raider himself with a Fate dice. You know?
Yes.
So that's really good too.
Melta 6.
I think anything that has devastating wounds with that kind of profile, like that weapon profile, is going to be an issue.
I think the main thing is when devastating wounds crosses with the anti-rule. That's what happened with the Death Watch. It was like, oh, you got anti-infantry 2+ and also devastating wounds, and now infantry disappear.
Eventually, I think GW is going to realize that devastating wounds is probably an issue, and mortal wounds being able to be carried over, you know, like the fact that mortal wounds can be carried over, you know, I think is a big thing too, because Wraith Knights would not be able to deal with infantry as well if mortal wounds didn't carry over.
I mean, mortal wounds came in for 8th edition, parallel to Age of Sigmar, to be things like explosions for tanks blowing up, for terrain interactions. It's like, oh, you take this many wounds, and it's sort of fair to elite armies who won't just take off this many models.
Yeah, it's everywhere, you know?
Yeah. Look under the fridge. There it is. There's mortal wounds. Underneath the table, more mortal wounds.
Yeah, I mean, it just seems like some armies just deal so many mortal wounds. And Eldar, unfortunately, are one of them with Wraith Knights and stuff like that. Outside of that, outside of those 2 units, the Wraith Guard and the Wraith Knight, there's not really much that's overpowered.
It might just be a cheap fire prism. But otherwise, yes, I think the army works really nicely, apart from the Wraith units. But I mean, who's going to run an all-Wraith army this day and age?
Right. Who's going to run 2 units of, 10 Wraith Guard with... Yeah. Yeah, they're really strong, honestly. Like, even, like, I was running Wraith armies last edition, and they weren't strong at all. And now running them again, it's like, what can you do? What can you do? GW intended, obviously, Mortal Wounds to work that way. They gave the Wraith Guard the Devastating Wounds ability, so, they've already had a chance to nerf what was obviously a problem.
I think they just went for points. Might do something actually probably in like September, October, when we've had a new codex for Space Marines and Tyranids.
I kind of always liked the Eldar as like self-serving, like trying to survive kind of thing. Like I kind of liked that better. It's like one Eldar life is worth 1,000,000 human lives kind of mentality. Like,
yeah, let's not get involved in all of these wars, which was kind of how
Right.
they were for the Horus Heresy. They're like, we just had, a self-imposed genocide, essentially. Maybe we'll just sit this one out.
yeah, Slaanesh is kind of a big deal, and we'll let the silly Monkai, deal with their own shit.
Silly Monkai.
Yeah, exactly. Like foolish Monkai fighting each other to death. And it's like over there, like literally just succumbed to Slaanesh.
Yes, fools that the Monkai are.
Right. I'm so glad that we are more disciplined and more intelligent than the Monkai, and it's like, well, didn't the same thing happen basically just with a Chaos God? Like, didn't you birth another Chaos God? Like, because we're so arrogant. There's nothing funnier than like, the arrogance level of the Eldar was so high that they freaking birthed another Chaos God. Like, it was that intense. Like, talk about narcissism, but like to the nth degree, you know? Oh gosh, Eldar are funny. I've always liked the Eldar lore. I think it's really cool, but yeah. Man. Yeah, this edition's been pretty insane so far. What have you thought about Sisters of Battle?
Sisters of Battle, I have enough miracle dice to do what I want. I just don't like the entire focus being on the miracle dice, that, oh, you need to lose units to get miracle dice. And then not a lot else going on in the faction other than you build your army around miracle dice. Tournament players, not so much. They're going with still, oh, we do Paragon War Suits with Morwen Val. Then we have our Zephyrim, because it doesn't follow Christianity, it follows Greek religion for some reason, even though we have Seraphim, which are Christianity.
Right.
Yes, thank you, commenter. I got that right this time. Yeah, put them with Celestine, and then you've got two, like an anvil and a hammer kind of thing.
Yeah. I think that's also, I think, why that's probably is because at the high level competitive players know that if they fully destroy a Sisters unit, you'll get a miracle dice. So they try not to do that as much as possible. They like game the system by like killing, just enough models to where the unit's useless.
But one sister, we're getting a hit and wound +1 is not doing a lot. Unless they have a heavy bolter, then they're going to take down your Avatar of Khaine.
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like I just think that mechanic is not. I think what they should probably do is they should change it to where you gain a miracle dice if a unit is brought below half strength. If a unit is ever brought below half strength, then you get a miracle dice instead of being destroyed.
Dice, keeps them fighting and they miraculously win despite being knocked down. I like that. That sort of more fits the fluff.
Yeah.
And it's not just
exactly.
parody fluff where, oh, we have battle sisters. Oh, guess who's going to die today?
Yeah, it's like they're all martyring themselves like every battle. It's like, how are there even battle sisters left?
Yes. I mean, who's joining up to this society that's like, our main goal is to die, just so you know. So we take you from these really privileged public schools, preppy schools, maybe more of an American term, and then
Yeah.
get some armor, off you go to battle, time to die. Yeah, I see people going,
Yeah,
I would like
exactly.
to choose a different school elective, please.
Like, this sucks. I want to drop this class.
Yeah. Martyrdom
It's like
101.
day one, it's like, shit, is it too late to drop? It's, oh my gosh, it's like having the like most hardcore professor and like everybody's looking around at each other like during the syllabus reading, like, oh, we're in the wrong class.
No, I've known
Like,
professors like in actual university that are like, most of you will fail the course. And at that point you think, hang on, professor, you're the one teaching this course, you're the one designing the course, you're the one marking this course. If most people are failing, it's on you. You're the common denominator here.
exactly.
I'm going to do something completely different, but with, a sensible person. So by third year,
Yes.
people were choosing courses based on the lecturer, not on like whether you care about the topic or not.
Yes, exactly. I didn't like this path. I'm going to choose a different one. This does not suit my style. Crazy. Sisters of Battle. Definitely drop that class. The Martyr class, drop it.
Yes.
Because you only have a 20% survival. Your survival rate is like not very high.
Our leader is 35 years old. This is not an old age person like senior position. You get like 30-year-old canonesses, bodyguards of Celestians, if they were still a unit, that are like 16-year-olds in the background.
Oh my god, dude. Yeah, exactly, right? You have your Celestin who's 35 and looks like she's 50 because of all the shit she's seen. Like,
everyone in my class died twice.
Like, I'm sorry, but the blood of martyrs does not make you look younger.
Yeah, class of 21. I remember them well. Miss, that was like, they only graduated last year. Yes, yes. If only there was still some remaining to tell us what it was like.
Right, and it's like, like, what are they doing now? And they're like servo skulls or some shit, Like, they've just all been converted into servo skulls so that even in death they can serve the Emperor. Like the Eldar, like with the birth of Slaanesh and everything like that. You have Tau, who have Kroot, who literally eat other species
don't mind me,
to gain their strength.
If you all Tau people could just look that way for a bit. Oh, num, 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 num.
Yeah, and the Tau just look the other way and they're like, oh, well, it's for the greater good.
You mustn't mess with local customs.
Yeah, like the whole wolfen thing, the space wolf thing, where they're literally just like turning into furries, like.
Yes. We must slay the heretic, the mutant, and the furry.
Yeah. Oh my god. Sorry to all the furries out there who have to hear this, but maybe it's for the best.
Not sorry to all the Space Wolf players who have to hear this.
Yeah, I know. Okay, what was your reaction when they came out with those new heads for Space Wolves? Those furry heads? It was a little bit weird, wasn't it?
That was just what I thought. It was like, this is not quite right, but
something's not right here, and I want to get to the bottom of it. Yeah, that was funny. I remember someone in our group played Space Wolves on the side, and he was like talking about how weird that was, like, and that obviously GW was just trying to appeal to their furry, demographic.
And sell some like add-on bits.
Yeah, exactly. Like next thing you know, they're going to be selling Space Marines with like fox ears and shit. like, that's funny. Oh my gosh.
Right. Maybe with fox ears, we should leave it there.
Yeah, I think at that point, like, maybe it's, maybe we're in a different game now. We're in a gotcha game or something like that.
Yes. Right. Well, thank you for joining me on another podcast. It's been lovely to have you, and I'm sure we'll catch up again sometime in the future.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for having me on the show. Appreciate it.
My darlings and viewers, have a great day of 40K.